So we have with us Mr. Vishwesh Krishnamoorthy, director at Corcoise Films. His creative pursuits extend far beyond ad filmmaking. Besides being an esteemed direct ad filmmaker, Vishwesh is also a musician, an actor, a beatboxer, a voice artist, a prolific writer. Thank you so much, Vishwesh, for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So, Vishwesh, your career trajectory, from being a journalist to working as a copywriter with Ogilvy, then working with MTV, and finally joining Corcoise Film as a director, it is quite diverse and inspiring. So, what inspired you to transition, from all these diverse stream of work into ad filmmaking?
Actually, I didn't know that there was writing involved in advertising, to be perfectly honest. I was quite naive at the beginning. I thought writing only involved either you write novels or you write columns in a newspaper. That's the kind of writers that I knew. And music was something that I picked up in my teens. So by age 14 or 15, I knew I was deeply interested in it, and I wanted to be interested in it on an academic level. So I wanted to learn and write exams and stuff. So there are these Trinity exams in music, so I wanted to write all of them. And then once, and that means that you needed to learn the theory, which is written music, staff notations and stuff. Okay. So I got into that in a big way, and from there, you could say that was the first form of creative exploration that I'd done, and it was in my teen years. So I was still writing my 10th standard exams, and then, I come from like a Palakkad regime or ancestry. So none of the people do indulge in music, but more in classical music and stuff.
Yeah.
So from music and prose was again something I was interested in because of novels. I used to read a lot of books when I was a kid. I continue to. And those were the creative things that I used to indulge in without any formal instruction in them. And my father used to also hand me a camera when we used to go, on vacations or weddings or something. He would just give me the camera, and I liked the camera. There was something about it that I liked, especially because it's like, it had a little thing to look into, right. and you could see the world through that. So even if I wasn't taking pictures, I would just be looking at things through that.
The lens, yeah.
So I guess that somewhere around when my relationship with cinema started developing, which is I started watching more films and liking films, and it wasn't simply entertainment, it started changing me. My perspective started changing. I started thinking differently because of certain films. There was also a single screen theatre near my house called Aurora. I grew up in Matunga. Okay. So, and Aurora Theatre had this thing where if a film wasn't running, if it wasn't successful, then they'll really lower the price. Okay. Yeah. So you could watch a film for 10 rupees at 11 a.m. in the morning, So I saw many films like that.
The morning shows.
Yes, and unpopular films, which I really liked. Most people didn't like it because it wasn't, it wasn't
a big commercial movie.
Yeah, it wasn't Dil To Pagal Hai. So, but I really started enjoying stuff like that, and I realized that there is something about this medium that I found there was something mystical about it, or something, but I never assumed that I'll know how to make anything, because I knew that there was a certain level of studying that you had to do to know how to make a film. But there were people in my life who encouraged me, or maybe saw some potential, and then they threw me a chance. They took a risk. I don't know whether it paid them off at the time, but it certainly did pay me off in the sense it made me feel a little more audacious about wanting to be involved in these fields professionally. So from music it led to writing. I used to do some theatre, so performative. All of it kind of converged at filmmaking. And advertising was the most accessible form at that time for me, because it involved writing, it involved some music. So the earliest things that I did in advertising was music. And then, I didn't think that an ad needed a script. Like, I was too naive to understand. When someone told me that, why didn't you try writing in advertising? And I said, there's writing in advertising? And he said, yeah. I said, what kind of writing? He said, stuff that's on billboards. I'm like, 50% off, how is that writing? He's like, no, like, you gotta write. Then I saw a one-show finalist reel, and then I saw a couple of, there was a folder I remember, which was called Can Finalists. And this was like back in the early 2000s. And I opened that and I saw some of those films, and it was an art form. Like I didn't see advertising as that before. And I remember watching the films of filmmakers like Rajesh Krishnan and Abhinay Deo, Prakash Verma, Prasann Pandey, Ram Madhwani, Mahesh Mathai. And I saw these films, Tarsem Singh, and then I realized, oh gosh, this is like a completely different form of art. Because I was into music videos, and it was a slant from music videos, Chris Cunningham and Michel Gondry and all of that. So then I was hooked. And then, Corcoise was kind enough to take a chance with me.
So, your diverse background, you spoke about music and copywriting at Ogilvy. So, did all of this kind of, shaped or influenced your directorial style or your storytelling abilities?
Yeah.
Was there an influence?
Absolutely, there was. In fact, I think there was, at different times with my age, there was more of one, in the sense that the very beginning I used to be very afraid of moving the camera, and almost all my ideas were musical because I was confident that I'll get that part of it right. And soon after that, everything was very performative. Everything would be staged like a play. So I wouldn't move the camera very much. It would just be two angles or something, because I was afraid. And this was like 16mm film or 35mm film at the time, which means that it was a very limited resource. Film was a limited resource, at least for the kind of budgets I was working on at the time. So it did influence, and then the moment it kind of got into digital, like the 5D Mark III, Mark 1 that came, it changed my life. I mean, in the sense, what simply happened was that earlier, your producer or someone who was with you would come and tell you, you just have 2 cans of film, which means that you had about 8 minutes of footage you can shoot. And then that became a card. And once you fill up a card, you can dump it into a hard drive, format the card, and you have more time now. So that changed everything. So then I started being bolder with musical choices, or wanting to move the camera, and like I always wanted to strap the camera on something unlikely, strap it on the side of a car, and do stuff like that. But I started getting a bit bolder with things, but definitely one influenced the other. But I know that for a short period I was overdoing any one aspect of it. All my films used to be either music driven, or it would be actor driven, or it would be like a single angle, or I was overdoing it at the beginning, I think.
Okay, so one of the recent campaigns your work that we love the most is your Blade campaign for Kohler. What all went behind it? Can you tell us a bit about the campaign? Like, how did you execute it?
Oh, it was a campaign that was a part of 3 films, and I think the writing itself, Adarsh and Shriram from Tilted had said. They're very funny guys, in general, like not just in scripts. They write meaningful scripts and funny scripts as well. They're really funny guys. And the first thing that I spoke to him was that spoke to both of them. They said something about making an ad for a commode, which again, like there's a joke in there somewhere. So firstly, that when the payoff is going to be a commode at the end of it, right? Like that's the final thing they're going to see in the film. So that it could kind of seem. Like either I didn't see that coming at all, or it could feel like, that was the reveal at the end.
Even we didn't see it coming.
Yeah. So and it was like an actualized commode, like a commode that's got its own sentient abilities. So it needed a certain measure. Like if we're going to be at the toilet at the end, then the rest of it has to be super classy. Like that was one of the things that we that really should work for it. Like the rest of the film should just feel so elegant and so like cranked up in terms of its sophistication that it ending at the toilet makes it that much funny. And it's not like we ended at a toilet that looks like a toilet. It's still like it's a regal.
Yeah.
I wish I had a toilet like that. So a lot of details were in making things. Who the person was. Who gets obsessive about a self sort of a sentient commode. So I think those aspects, most times as an ad film director, the first time you get acquainted with what you're about to make is when someone narrates the script to you, and it's great if that narration has one thing that hit you and didn't leave you right at the beginning, because you kind of need to remember that. So when he said that it is about a commode, that's what was left with me at the end. That it is a commode at the end of the story. So we better make it land there correctly. And if it does, then it would seem timeless. Like for me, the best commercials, even if you watch stuff that was made 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it doesn't, the technology and the execution might be from the age, but the comic timing or the edit or the music, like all of that, those kind of things, they tend to be timeless, which is why stuff that you watch even from the 30s and 40s still hold.
The physical ads.
Yes. So there's something about well-timed cuts or the choices of cast, like faces and the pacing of a film. So those are the things we paid a lot of attention to, and the fact that things need to look sophisticated to every excruciating detail, so that the toilet part feels rewarding.
So what was the brief given to you? A one-liner or two-liner brief? What was it?
So Cola, the campaign involved 3 products, and all of these products were quite premium, as in they're not products that are for like your everyday choices. They're sort of like the luxury version of the same thing. So there was the other 3 in it was there was a wash basin that's made of some very specific sort of quartz or something that had a color shade to it, and the other one was a steam emanating basin. So for me, I often I don't look at, if there's a campaign that involves more than one film, that I try to find one thread that seems like it's part of a pair or a trio. And so all of them needed to have that level. So one of the things that we often do is we start talking about who these people are in the film, what kind of lives they lead, or what are these characters, even if it's fictional, even if it's a guy that only takes left turns, or a guy that only eats cup noodles every day, like whatever, like you fictitiously just brainstorm about who these characters are. So one part of it was that these are luxury products, so these are fastidious people. They're very finicky about everything, and so that needed to come across. So there was a certain eccentricity that the campaign needed to have. That it's an odd person, but an odd person with a lot of authority. So it had to be a boss of some kind. So everyone's kind of has to wait for it. Yeah, and wait for this man to finish being odd, or like they just have to wait. So including his family members, he's being odd, and everyone's kind of waiting around him. And there were many situations written, some of which made it into the final cut. Okay. But there were many, and we often try to persuade the client to go with some of the more bizarre ones. Okay. And it really depends on how much you want to. It's like a volume knob, of how bizarre you want to go with something, and you kind of need to bring that knob to a point to a volume level that everyone's kind of comfortable with. Maybe I can listen to the thing a lot louder than everyone else, in terms of how bizarre it can be. But it also had to be in keeping with being serious about what they wanted as the impact of putting it out.
So do you always get the creative freedom? Like you said, you always want to go with the bizarre one.
I do want to crank things up, and often all creative people want to go a little over the line, go where it kind of shocks a little bit. But with Tilt and Adarsh and Sriram, they've always been very generous with improvising and taking the script and adding some strokes and adding some flourishes to them. But it's like even when you write something, at the end of it you're editing it, so you're snipping stuff off, and it's the same. It's like you make a list of things that you want to do, and then at the time, it's funny, and you're slapping your knee, and you're like, oh, this is great, this is going to be hilarious. And then you sleep over it, and you're like, not that funny. I mean, like the first one still, so you kind of snip the things that felt excessive, and hopefully you came up with something that everyone finds funny.
So Vishwesh, you also won a Cannes Lion in 2012 for the Devarest campaign. How did that win or that achievement kind of set the stage for your subsequent work in the industry?
I guess it helps people identify you. I mean, it doesn't, often when you get applauded or awarded for some work that you did, there are days where you try to remember how it was while you were making it, because time, like when you speak to me about this campaign, I have to jog my memory to remember, because at the time you're just trying to manage the circumstances and try to do the things that you want to do.
Right.
And working on the Doers was life changing in many ways for me. First and foremost, I got to explore. Like, the thing about the Doers was the stories were all human, and it was about India, and I got to travel the length and breadth of India, nearly every state, for about a year. So I had already come back completely transformed. So when there was this kind of acknowledgement of the highest pedigree,
That too in 2012.
yes. So it just reminded me that the things that I chose to do for nothing but where the heart pointed often led to the most widespread recognition for me. Anything else that I did using some sort of strategic intention was not quite as long lasting. It influenced everything, including the style that I film in. There were many that wanted to know how it was put together, because at the time it was not particularly easy to understand how such a concept was sold to a client and how it was made. It was 10 documentaries for a brand, and involving folk music and tribal music and other eminent musicians in India, and putting it together, getting it broadcast on. How did it all happen? Of course, I can't say that I was the only one involved in it. There were many people that helped get that spaceship in the air, but it certainly did attach a sort of a creative direction that people identified with me. Like, one of the first things that came after that was Satyamev Jayate, which at the time for me was a very important thing, because it was a show that was about social reform in India. So I started enjoying the fact that people started seeing any cultural influence on society and started identifying me with it. So that I got very happy with that. Anyone that approached me after that was less to sell soda or bubble gum or something like that. It was more to do with real social reform, and that got me very, very excited. In the sense, I was very grateful to myself for having taken that choice of doing one thing for almost an entire year, because The Doerist wasn't like an ad film. It was an entire year of doing just that one thing.
This music for Satyamev Jayate was amazing.
Yeah.
It was fun and kirkire. And,
yes. The show. Yes.
The show. So, Vishwesh, as someone who is deeply involved in Mumbai's theatre circuit and independent filmmaking scene as well, so how do you balance your personal creative pursuits with your professional commitments? As an ad film director, and how does your involvement in these creative pursuits influence your approach to commercial advertising?
One is that they all get mingled. They stop being separate streams. It all circles from one into the other, into sort of a concentric spiral. And I think the great part about advertising, particularly in India, is that it's always been very creative, whether it's emotional things or whether it's funny things. And like, if you remember any of the work that was done for Pidilite, or what's been done like recently for Cred, or just before that, I can remember the Happy Dent ads where an entire city made with people with glowing teeth. So these are quite wild ideas, and often need something that takes you by surprise in every way, like in terms of casting, in terms of a treatment, in terms of where you film it and how you film it and whatnot. And being involved in a number of things often kind of gives you a glimpse of finding new talent in different places, and you use unlikely appointment. Like, you throw a person in a casting situation that's not conventional.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and advertising in India has often favored that kind of style, and it's always been the best ads have been the ones where, you know, something like that has happened. Like, particularly actors, most of the biggest actors today, you know, in terms of Bollywood, like I would say Deepika Padukone is one I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, she came via advertising. I remember she was a Limca girl, if I wasn't wrong. She's also been in a parachute commercial. And stuff like that, you know, where, so you know that, so that talent was found through advertising. So advertising has this way of, you know, you need to often refresh things and find and show a newer idea to the world, and then that sort of takes off from there.
Great. So, with your extensive experience in the advertising industry, what are some of the challenges, biggest challenges that you have faced, and how did you overcome them?
I don't know if I've overcome them. I continue to fight. I mean, the challenges have, to be honest, been the same. They just get a little bigger. They get a little more relentless.
Okay.
It often, I think, is about there is a funneling system for an idea to finally come to a place where it needs to be produced into a film, and it goes through all sorts of strange, you know, like it goes into this cocoon where all sorts of things happen to it. Like there's something called an animatic that's made, which is kind of like, if you've ever seen an animatic, it's quite a thing. So when the animatic is made, it's very misleading the way it's made. But it is, those things are made, and then there are certain lines and certain strange things that get attached to a film by the time it comes, and it all
Animatics are the animated videos that we see, or is
no.
it
An
something else?
animatic. So I'll try to be brief with my explanation. What happens is somebody writes a script for a brand. The script is first narrated, like you know, a person tells a story, like the oldest form of storytelling. A person narrates a story.
Narrates, yeah.
And then the client will want to see what this would be like in a visual. So if I tell you that, oh, there's a man walking down the street and then suddenly a dog starts chasing him. Now, when you're watching it as audiovisual, there's suddenly like, you know, things are going to start moving faster, right? Like, so the dog's chasing him, and is he running? Are we running with him? How exactly does it come across? So people make sort of like a storyboard.
Oh yeah, story.
With very minimal animation in it. That's called an animatic, and sometimes there's a narration over it. एक आदमी रास्ते पे चल रहा था, उसके पीछे कुत्ता भागने लगता है, or something of that. So, you know, it depends on who's executed it. But often, by the time you get involved with producing a film, I mean, like that is needs to be made into a film. There's possibly an animatic involved, and that animatic has been in the system of the client and the agency for some time now. So they get attached to certain things in it.
Okay.
Which was a wrong idea to begin with. Like, you know, but now it's like it's a fossil in the system. And now to change those things are like they seem quite simple and logical to me, but they're too radical because they've been in that system for so long. Oh, we're not going to do the bus thing, you know. It's sort of like, oh, but we thought the bus thing works, you know, whatever. Like,
yeah.
So those challenges it's really more systemic than anything else, and it's to. The thing about advertising is that it has a tendency to play safe, and when you make safe advertising, you have great meetings, but great meetings don't make good films, not always. So sometimes for the sake of having a great meeting, people play it really safe with their scripts, and you don't want to upset the board. You don't want to, but often most radical ideas have a measure of risk, and there is a potential of being wrong with it. But most times it won't be that wrong. You still need to kind of, which is why I think in modern day advertising, the stuff that really resonates is where a certain risk was taken. And something cool was done. You know, it could have been, and someone like in every faculty of this, like every portion, like part of the table, there needs to be someone that has a little bit of a, you could say, has the charm to take the risk. And that kind of also makes you want to make sure that you land it correctly.
Right.
So I'd say that none of these challenges have changed. It's just I guess that the modern day challenges like fighting social media and the 10-second attention window now.
Yeah,
so
that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, it is
attention
mainstream.
span has gone totally
True.
down.
But it's, I would see it more as the modern viewer's mind. I mean, it's more goldfish than it was before. But it's also the opposite, because people binge 5 hours of a show. And earlier 3 hours of a film was too long. So there's some part of this that we could tap into. We just need to think of it in the right spirit, in the right way. And think one will be able to crack it.
Given the rapidly changing landscape of advertising today, how do you see the current scenario of production houses and ad filmmaking? With the new emerging trends that we are seeing, new advancements in technology that we are seeing coming up. So, how do you see the current landscape?
I think it'll take some time. The production house aspect of things, I don't know if I have enough knowledge to comment on that. All I know is that there is a certain level of so advertising, making ads has always been a director's medium, because firstly it is to do with the denomination of the duration. When you need to make stories within a certain bracket of time, that takes it's a gearbox that advertising filmmakers tend to have. It's not something that just about anybody has, and you need to have acquainted yourself with it enough for you to be able to do it. I think that there needs to be more conviction among production companies to seek what they want at the terms that they want it. Mm-hmm. Mainly because most jobs are sort of like a rescue operation. Commercial needs to be on air by a certain date, and there'll be a celebrity involved or not have a celebrity involved, and then there needs to be a song or no song or whatever. And then there are these terms that get and at the time, because of the number of companies sort of vying for a job, these terms suddenly become disadvantaged for a production company. I mean, it becomes a little myopic in the way things are approached. This is again my personal opinion. I might need to be corrected about actually the goings on of it. Like I said, I don't know enough to comment on that. But as far as just how the production aspect, the production house aspect of things, I think you need to be a little aggressive with what you need as filmmakers, because you bring it to life, and it's less of a service industry and more of an execution and a creative industry. It's more design led and more personality led, character led than service led. The second aspect, I think, as far as the tech is concerned, is that there's an infrastructure component to it as well. Like the world has sort of become a little smaller. Like most of the gear that is used the world over, we have access to it. But there is also the you can either make something fast or you can make something good. Yeah. And most times you need things done fast. So
I was about to ask you which one is better.
Oh, you have to make things good. So I guess it's actually about taking decisions at the right time.
Right.
It's like, we've been raised by a generation that cooked and went to work and raised kids and, all of that stuff. So, but, like our parents managed it, right? Like they managed to do all of that. So, and if you think about it, doing it yourself today, just the thought of it would tire you. But it happened because you planned things a little in advance and you took decisions when they had to be taken. So that, I think, is an important aspect. Like you can't, and because so much of it is subject to someone, the client, or someone at some end not being available, or an actor giving a date, all of a sudden, now you have 2 days to erect a set. 1 day to film it. We're filming it in 3 days. We need to do the PPM just before. So all of this is like, it's sort of like a crash landing, and then it's hard to land something with conviction when you work in that kind of scenario. So I feel like those things are more the challenges, and technology is helping it, but it's also making people a little complacent about things. Like, ये तो हो जाएगा, ये तो post में हो जाएगा. इसको तो clean up कर देंगे, all that sort of things. You don't bother taking a C-stand out of a shot because you think it's quicker to clean it out, in the footage. Stuff like that. I feel like there's some of this is just getting, like, the ease has made it a little worse.
Okay. So how do you see these new age tech tools like generative AI? You can generate a lot of new things. You can generate a video, music. This Chat GPT. So how do you see these new tech? Do you also use it in your campaigns? In your work?
Oh, I wouldn't say use it in campaigns. I definitely use it purely out of curiosity. And I think they're good tools. My personal opinion is that AI is not the problem. The person operating the tool is the solution. So I'm not intimidated by it. I just think I would love to learn how to use it, just like we learned how to use cameras, and you know, we it is going to keep getting better. When we, you know, one of the things I remember George Miller talking about making Mad Max Fury Road. I think he was in his late 70s or early 80s, and he was just completely fascinated that you can clean cables out. You know, when you dangle an actor with a cable, he's like, oh, you can clean cables out these days. And you know, if a man walks on sand, you can clean the footprints out. So it seems that, you know, because the crew would have footprints all over the sand, and he's like, now you can clean all of that out. So now imagine a man in his 80s making films today finds all of this stuff so exciting that he can make better films. I think I would prefer to choose to adopt an attitude like that. Like I think computer generated imagery, it has been and is here to stay.
Okay.
And it has been, you know, every product that you've been seeing, even through the late 90s and the 2000s, every time you saw bubblegum or something, you saw chilies and potato chips coming in together, like there's a good chance that that was made on a computer. And it is here to stay. So is the analog stuff. And it is always going to be a blend of both those things. We are going to, you know, make things in analog, and we're going to blend it with computer generated images, whether it's artificially generated by inputs or whether it's 3D artists or designers sitting and modeling them and rigging them and animating them. It is going to be some blend of all of these things, and it would be foolish to deny it. My, again, personal opinion. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it's here to stay, and I would embrace it, and I would embrace it with a lot of excitement.
Okay, great. So, Vishwesh, we already spoke about the challenges. We discussed the short time attention span that consumers have got these days. Plus, also there's a lot of competition in ad filmmaking as well. We see a lot of new production houses coming up. There are a lot of independent ad filmmakers. There even brands are doing some in-house stuff today. So, what is your take on on this kind of competition? What do you think about it?
I don't think anything will stay the same for too long. Things are meant to evolve, and as technology and the way we use it keeps changing. I mean, you know, when you look at the way people watch films today, most people watch films on their phones.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have imagined ever that, you know, like on a 5-inch or a 6-inch screen, you could keep staring at it for hours. I didn't think that would have. I would have imagined that there would have been something posture driven that would have dissuaded me from doing it. A television felt like staring at a wall, right? Mm-hmm. And sitting on something quite comfortable and staring at a wall. That kind of seemed. It seemed like you could do that for hours, or you could do that when you're unwell and whatnot. Like, I never imagined the phone would become what it is today. For example, at this point, my phone is more powerful than my laptop. It's got more RAM and more bigger hard disk and stuff, which it cannot be denied. It must be observed for what it is. Like even with EV cars or with everything becoming wireless. I mean, technology is constantly going to change. It's going to make things more convenient, and as things become more convenient, you're going to become less patient. Everything becomes an appliance, you know, like so your attention span is going to continue to reduce. But like I said a little earlier, one part of it is that we can't stand anything for more than 30 seconds. We kind of move on. But when it concerns sitting and binge watching shows, you sit for 5 hours, you don't know where it went. So even when I'd say that, yeah, there's stuff like reels that you kind of just keep scrolling through. But there you go. You spent hours doing something. So it is a part of the technology. The technology is making you behave that way. Mm-hmm. And it's also because things are so quick, you get impatient with them. So like booting time, for example, earlier you switched the television on, it took a few seconds to switch on. And then the image would come. But like now you switch something on, you're like, why isn't it on yet? Like,
My television is still slow.
Yeah. Or like internet, right? Like the minute you double click on something, why isn't it opened yet? This has, and better internet speed has made you more impatient.
Right.
So I guess that as technology becomes easier, maybe tomorrow the Apple Vision Pro is going to make things different. Who knows? Maybe virtual reality and virtual reality advertising is going to be the next thing. Who knows? Yeah, so
that would be interesting to.
Yes, very much so. I have dabbled in virtual reality filmmaking, and it's a different beast completely.
Okay.
Yeah, so so I feel like this is not something that I'm excited to see what's happening next, because it's tech, and I am usually quite childlike about technology. I indulge in it, and I look forward to it.